Chair, I'd like to confirm with you that we are up and running on YouTube now, so we'll be ready to start at 6 p.m.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, good evening. I'd like to welcome you to the Town of Fort Erie Community Adjustment meeting of September 17, 2020. Please note that this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube, and I'll call this meeting to order. First, I'd like to introduce you to the staff and committee members for tonight's hearing. Staff members are the following: Mackenzie Cece, she's the meeting host who is doing the back-end technical duties. Kara Rage, she's the secretary treasurer. For tonight's meeting, the following members are the following: we have Chris Nutt, Ken Burden, and David G. Francesco, and I'm Sam Solo. I'll be chairing tonight's meeting. To those members of the public who may be participating electronically in the public meeting portion of this meeting tonight, you may wish to put your view on gallery view by clicking the top right corner from speaker view. I also ask that you are mindful of background noises for the duration of the meeting. Please also note that participating members of the public remain in the virtual waiting room via telephone or electronically until they're called upon during the public meeting. This is a statutory public meeting under the Planning Act for the purposes of considering both minor variance and consent applications. Members of the committee have been provided with all written comments received by agencies and the public prior to this meeting. Committee members are asked to mute their microphones until you're asked to speak. Please raise your hand if you'd like to speak and vote by raising your hand. The purpose of this meeting is to obtain input from residents relative to the application. Those participating online via Zoom will be asked to raise their virtual hand when they wish to speak. On a computer, you can do this by clicking on participants in the bottom center of the screen, and then by clicking raise hand. On a mobile device, you can tap more on the bottom right and then tapping raise hand. You'll then be brought into the meeting by staff. You can then unmute yourself and start your video by using the buttons on your screen. If you're participating by phone and you wish to raise your hand, press *9 and you'll be unmuted by staff. Next, we'll hear from the applicant or agent, and then from those in support or opposition to the application or ask questions. We ask that each attendee keep their comments to under 10 minutes to allow all attendees the opportunity to speak. Applicants' attendees are advised they are free to leave the webinar once a decision has been made on their application. Each application will proceed in the following order: the Secretary Treasurer to summarize purpose and effect of the application and any comments received. Applicant called upon to speak and make any further comments if they have any. Committee members will ask questions of the applicant. The public will be asked to speak one at a time to state their full name and address for the record and any comments they may have towards the application. The chair will close the application once all comments have been heard. And then the committee members will make a decision on the application approved, refused, or deferred and state if any conditions apply. Please address your comments, questions through the chair. Each application will be in order in which they appear on the agenda. The notice of decision will be provided to applicants starting the outcome of the hearing and any conditions of approval if required. Please note that correspondence and comments received this evening are restricted to matters of the Committee of Adjustment and Planning Act. And consider each application evening. The Committee of Adjustment will have due regard for the provisions of Section 45 and Section 53 of the Ontario Planning Act of 1990 as amended. A 20-day appeal period exists for each application heard this evening. Final dates are noted on the notice of the decision and are available by requesting a copy in writing. I'll begin by asking committee members present if they have any conflicts of interest with respect to any of the applications we heard this evening. David?
No, I do not.
Chris?
I do not.
Ken?
Yes, I have one conflict. It's for A2520, that is 103 Butler's Drive North. I have an indirect pecuniary interest because I'm an employee of the company that developed and built the home of John and Karen Hobbins. And the company continues to develop and build homes in that community.
Yes, you just have the one conflict of interest?
Just the one conflict, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And I have a conflict of interest in my conflict of interest with minor variance file A2420. I have a service contract with Misco Generators and Electric. It's an annual contract. And I also purchased a generator from them, so I cannot be part of that hearing. Is there anybody else? We're okay with that? Okay. And now, as the Secretary Treasurer, noticed this meeting was properly given in accordance with the provisions of the Ontario Planning Act.
Yes, it was.
And have you received any requests for adjournment or withdrawal respecting any of tonight's applications?
We have not, but I would like to note some changes to the agenda with regards to minor variance file number A2620. The owner's name is listed on the original agenda as Tammy Cullen, and her name is Tanya Cullen, Tanya or Tanya. And also as well, the adoption of minutes, I would request that we defer that to the next meeting through you, Chair, at the time of the, when it's time for that.
For both meetings?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do any of the members have any comments of deferring the adoption of minutes? We're okay with that? Okay, I'm going to relinquish my role as chair, and I appoint David G. Francesco for the first application. So Dave, you can take over, and Mackenzie, you have to do what you have to do to get me out of the room. Thanks.
Thanks, Sam. Okay, I'd like to proceed with the first application. I'd like to call our first file, minor variance number A2420, 1899 Thompson Road. The applicant is JP Designs, and the owner is Don Misco Generators and Electric. And I'd like the staff to bring the applicant into the webinar to participate.
He's just on his way in. Chair, the applicant is available now.
Thank you. Would the Secretary Treasurer please read the related correspondence and comments received?
I will. The purpose and effect of this application is to permit expansion of a non-conforming use and a reduced front yard setback in order to facilitate construction of an addition to an existing industrial use at 1899 Thompson Road. The property is zoned neighborhood development and environmental conservation in accordance with the zoning bylaw. The industrial use of the property is considered to be an existing non-conforming use. The owner has submitted an affidavit that demonstrates that the use has existed on site since November 28, 2011. This predates the current ND zoning of the property, which was implemented in 2013 when the town brought the zoning bylaw into conformity with the official plan through a housekeeping amendment. The applicant is seeking permission to expand the non-conforming use as per subsection 45(2)(a)(I) of the Planning Act. The applicant is also requesting permission to reduce the front yard setback to 5 meters, where the ND zoning permits a front yard setback of 7.5 meters. This request to permit an expansion of non-conforming use as per the Ontario Planning Act. The 4 tests of a minor variance are not applicable. However, planning staff offer the following analysis to assist the committee in regard to this request. This proposal relates to the expansion of an existing non-conforming use. The current industrial use has existed since 2011 when the property and the surrounding area were zoned dry industrial. Town building permits records indicate that the building itself was constructed in 2003. This proposal entails expansion of the existing building through additions to the front and the back that are 97.7 square meters each. The total floor area of the structure will increase from 76 square meters to 271.4 square meters. Section 4.3 of the official plan provides some policy guidance for proposals to expand non-conforming use to ensure expansion maintains the wider public interest. That the proposed extension or enlargement of the established non-conforming use will not unduly aggravate the situation created by the existence of the use, especially in regard to the land use designation of this plan and the requirements of the zoning bylaw applying to the specific area. The industrial warehouse land use will not unduly aggravate the existence of the use. While the increase in the floor area is large, lot coverage remains relatively low at just over 15% of the lot. The existing use is relatively low impact and has existed without nuisance to several existing residences nearby to date. B, that the proposed extension on enlargement will be in an appropriate proportion of the size of the non-conforming use established prior to the passing of the original implementing zoning bylaw. Other than the reduced front yard setback, which is discussed further in this report, the proposed expansion will remain well under the 35% maximum lot coverage permitted. The existing will maintain the existing large side yard setbacks to the north and south and exceed the required setback to the rear yard and side yard to the west. The addition will maintain the one-story height of the existing structure. It is staff's opinion that the proposed expansion will remain appropriately sized. That an application which would affect the boundary between areas of different land use designations in this plan will only be processed under these policies if it can be considered as a minor adjustment under this plan. Major intrusions will, however, require an amendment. This proposal will not impact the land use designations of the official plan as is being considered through the Committee of Adjustment approval. That the characteristics of the existing non-conforming use and the proposed extension will be examined with regard to noise, vibration, fumes, smoke, dust, odor, lighting, and traffic generation. No amendment to the zoning bylaw shall be made if one or more such nuisance factors will be created or increased so as to add substantially to the incompatibility of the use with the surrounding area. The existing use is relatively low impact and has not resulted in undue nuisances to date. The proposed addition areas will be used for warehousing, which is not anticipated to create or increase nuisance impacts on adjacent properties. That the neighboring conforming uses will be protected where necessary by the provision of the areas for landscaping, buffering, screening, and appropriate setbacks. Being an industrial use, the subject property is not subject to site plan control. However, planning staff with proponents of industrial development to submit a site plan and will endeavor to protect adjacent uses as much as possible through commenting and site plan review of the proposed expansion. Other than the front yard setback, this proposal meets or exceeds all other setback requirements. That traffic parking conditions in the vicinity will not be adversely affected by the approval of the application. Sufficient space in the side yards and rear yard for parking areas in the property. Ingress, egress to the site already exist and will not change from this proposal. Staff will also review vehicle movement on site through site plan review. That adequate provisions, however, will be made for off-street parking. All parking and or loading will continue to occur on the subject property. Those municipal services such as water supply, sanitary and storm sewers and roads are adequate or can be made adequate. The subject property is already serviced with the town water service. There are no sanitary sewers in the portion of the Gilmore neighborhood. The proposed expansion will be serviced by a private septic system subject to the approval of the Niagara Region. If future expansion of sanitary sewers in the area occurs, the property will be required to connect at that time. The proposed expansion will not increase the burden on public agencies or public health and safety. This subject property is not located within the hazard area regulated by MPCA. Compliance with natural heritage, agricultural, rural, and other policies. The subject property is located in the urban area boundary and is consistent with regional and provincial policy, which seeks to locate this type of use in built-up urban area. The development area is not located within any natural heritage areas. Compliance with applicable regulations for the MPCA under the Conservation Authority Act. The subject property is not within the jurisdiction of the MPCA or the Niagara Parks Commission, as it's located outside the area that those agencies regulate. The 4 tests of the minor variance must also be met with this application. The proposal to permit a reduction to the front yard setback is minor. The subject property has sufficient space to accommodate parking in the side yard and rear yard. Planning staff are of the opinion the reduced front yard setback will not significantly impact the streetscape. The industrial use of the subject property is existing non-conforming, and the owner has provided an affidavit that indicates the use predates the current zoning. The proposal to reduce the setback is desirable as it permits an existing industrial operation to expand. There is sufficient space on the property to accommodate the increased floor area and vehicle parking. The general intent of the front yard setback of the zoning regulation is to ensure that there is space on the parcel for vehicle parking without encroaching on a road allowance and to maintain streetscape along a street. This proposal meets the intent of the zoning bylaw. The reduced front yard setback is associated with the proposal to expand an existing non-conforming use. The request to expand the existing operation is approved by the committee. The associated variance will be considered to meet the general intent of the official plan, which recognizes the existing uses. Based on the above comments, planning staff report the request to expand the non-conforming use and to reduce the front yard setback. No comments were received from the engineering department, building department, fire department. The region stated that they have no objection to the minor variance. However, as noted in their report, they would want to ensure that the sediment and erosion control should be installed during construction. No issues from our drainage superintendent. There were public comments received in favor, who lives next door to Thompson Road for approximately 4 years, and he has no problem with what is mentioned on the sign posted. That they're great neighbors and they keep the place neat and clean. Comments were also received from the MPCA that the property, they have no objections to A24, as well as requesting that silt fencing is used along the south property line during construction. And we did receive other comments from a neighbor as well. They are neighbors who share the south and east boundary, and they also have no objection to the proposed changes. That concludes your report, with the only conditions stated within the report are that sediment and erosion control be installed during construction, that silt fencing is used along the south property line during construction, and that a new septic system be installed on the subject property subject to the satisfaction of the Niagara region. That concludes.
Thank you, Kira. Would the applicant like to make any comments on the application or correspondence received?
That'd be minimal. It's quite comprehensive there. Yeah, I think it's really just an extension of what's there. It's a pretty basic building extending towards the front. Very similar in aesthetic from what's there now. It's also nice because he doesn't have to use the shipping containers there for storage now. So it's great to see all the support from the neighbors and from planning staff, because this is a successful business in town that is now able to expand in really an industrial area, which we don't really have a lot of. So it's nice to see a business grow. That's really it.
Thanks, Jason. I'd like to ask the committee members if they have any questions for the applicant, and I'll start with Ken.
Mr. Chair, I don't have any questions tonight.
Thank you. Chris?
Mr. Chair, I do not have any questions on this application.
Thanks, Chris. Does anyone in the audience wish to comment? Please raise your virtual hand and you'll be asked to speak one at a time.
Chair, I'm seeing no one in the audience that wishes to speak to this application.
Thank you. Since there are no further questions and no further audience comments, are the members ready to make a decision? And
I'm prepared, Chair.
Sorry, Chris. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, I was going to say I'm prepared to make a decision. I agree with planning staff's comments, and as well as Mr. Pizzacarola's, that it's good use of dry industrial land and expansion of the business is always good to see. It's good news for the town. So I'll be supporting the application tonight.
Thank you. Ken?
Mr. Chair, I also concur with what Chris is saying. It's a good news story, and it's great to see the development.
Thank you. I'll also be in favor of this application tonight for all the reasons that my fellow members gave. It's a great addition to the town, and I'm glad to see him growing. I'd like to ask, now entertain a motion with conditions on this application.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we approve minor variance A24/20 for 1899 Thompson Road, based on the written and oral comments received with regards to this report, and agrees with the minor variance report analysis and recommendation that this application meets the four planning tests act tests for minor variance.
Thank you. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'll also be in favor. The motion is carried. Your application has been approved. You'll receive written notice of the committee's decision, and the decisions will become final so long as no appeals are received within 20 days of the notice. Thank you for attending.
Thank you.
Thanks, David, for doing that as a chair of that conflict I had. Thank you so much. You did great. I'll ask Ken to now, I guess Ken's going to be the one that has a conflict. He'll be relinquishing himself from the application. And Mackenzie, if you'd like to bring the applicant in. And just for the public, it's file number 2520, 103 Butler's Drive North.
Chair, the applicant is available.
Okay, thank you. And the applicant is John Hobbins and the owner is John and Karen Hobbins. And are you ready to proceed tonight?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I'll ask Karen to read all the correspondence. Once she's done with the correspondence, then we'll ask questions. And if you have any comments, we'll ask then. Thank you.
Purpose and effect of this application is to request a reduction to the rear yard setback for a proposed deck, which is 1.8 meters above grade. Staff have received one letter of an objection from an area resident and also many letters of support from area residents. The resident has expressed concern with requested variance, as in their opinion, reducing the rear yard setback to half is not minor in nature. Further approval of the requested variance, as it will set a wrong precedent for the neighborhood. In order to approve a minor variance, it must meet the following four tests. Is it minor in nature? The proposed reduction to reduce the rear yard setback to 4.2 meters is minor in nature and will have no measurable impact on the abutting properties. Typically, no rear setback is required if the height of the deck is less than 0.5 meters, or a rear yard setback of 3 meters is required for a deck which is less than 1.5 meters in height. The applicant is proposing a deck which is 1.8 meters above grade due to the grade differential on the property and the land sloping toward the north property line. A proposed deck will have no adverse impact on the abutting properties, as the applicant is proposing a setback of 8 meters and 6.3 meters from the abutting westerly and easterly properties respectively. The proposed generous setback will help in mitigating any loss of privacy. Further to proposed deck is sufficiently set back from the PSWs and will have no adverse impact on the natural heritage feature. Is the proposed variance considered desirable and appropriate? Decks provide desirable outdoor living space and are a common element in newer condominium developments. The proposed decks will have a minimal impact on the abutting dwellings, as a generous setback of 8 meters and 6.3 meters is provided between the proposed deck and the abutting westerly and easterly properties. Does the proposal meet the intent of the zoning bylaw? The general intent of the minimum rear yard setback is to ensure adequate amenity space for the residents and privacy between abutting property owners. The proposed decks will provide outdoor amenity space for future residents. Further, the proposal provides a generous setback between the proposed deck and abutting dwellings to the west and future dwelling to the east, and will help in mitigating any loss of privacy between the abutting property owners. The secondary plan land use designation permits the use of subject lands for single detached dwellings. This proposal meets the intent of the secondary plan. Based on the above comments, planning staff support the requested variance application. No comments were received from further to that, I did miss this section, sorry. There's a part about the environmental. The removal of the EC zone is actually recommended by staff, as it was noted at the rear of the property as well. No comments were received from engineering. Review of the minor variance. Building stated that a review of the minor variance application, as well as the building department records, has been completed, and it is noted that the rear setback identified may not be correct. Building department site plan drawing for the house construction was provided to committee members, which has the rear yard setback to two different rear lot lines as 8.03 meters and 8.71 meters. With a proposed deck size of 4.15 meters, the actual rear setback dimension would be 3.88 meters. Please keep in mind that this is an angled dimension, so it may be different than calculated. The site plan from this building department records have been attached for reference. Fire had no comments. The comments received from neighbor were reviewing this application would require information on setback criteria and requirements. Setbacks are a fundamental requirement of any home construction compliance, as usually mandatory. The builder should have been aware of this issue during the design phase and advise clients accordingly. Rear decks are usually part of any new design, even for future construction options. Your information classifies the request as minor. Given that it is requesting to reduce setback to half of the required setback, I would suggest this is not minor. As initially stated, review of the cause and whether or not this would be significant to any properties in close proximity. Issues such as access, privacy, and neighboring property concerns, to name a few, should be reviewed. Additionally, accepting this variance application could result in precedent where other property owners have similar variances. This would reduce the effectiveness of the setback rules, which is contrary to their purpose. In conclusion, my opinion in reducing the setback is excessive. I suggest that if approval is considered, that the setback reduction request be modified and reduce deck size. The drainage superintendent noted that it is part of the man drain watershed. No comments received from the community planning department. We did receive numerous letters in favor of the application who are support. I believe there's 1, 2, 3, 7 letters, 8 letters in favor of the application from neighboring communities. And the only condition noted in the report then is that the applicant submit an application for Environmental Advisory Committee for the approval and removal of the EC zone prior to the issuance of the building permit. That concludes your comments.
Thanks, Kara. Mr. and Mrs. Hobbins, do you have any comments on any of the correspondence that Kara's just read?
We do, and thank you. We'd like to begin by thanking the committee to allow us a chance to speak tonight. In an effort to be diligent and to follow process, I myself have had several consultations with staff from the building department and the planning department. And I have to say that we've been very impressed with the willingness and the effort by the city representatives who have graciously worked with me and guided me through the process of this variance. In particular, I'd like to just recognize Anamika Dewalria in Planning and Development, Kara on the Committee of Adjustment, Jay Maraca in the Building Division, and to other representatives such as Fire Chief Ed Melanson and Keegan Jennings. You know, through this process, it's been important to us to ensure that our neighbors were aware and understood of our plans to build the deck and to seek this variance. I personally have talked to and showed detailed drawings of the deck design to each of our 6 neighbors that reside within 70 meters of the property. And as such, we've received the letters of support that Kara has mentioned. All the neighbors have mentioned that they feel that they have no concerns and they support the deck design and the variance. A comment regarding the environmental piece. I have already submitted the application for the Environmental Advisory Committee for the removal of the EC zone. And regarding the letter from the chief building official, Keegan Jennings, regarding the setback and the discrepancy that seems to exist, and he referenced the idea that it may be due to the angle dimension, so that there may be a difference in calculation. I provided the committee with a drawing titled Oak Lot 64 plans, which were attached and submitted. And these actually show two different locations of our lot. Slight variant or difference, of course. What you can see there is that we are in fact able to achieve the 4.2 meter setback, and we can guarantee the committee that we will be at least equal to or greater than 4.2 on our setback. Regarding the objection from one of the area residents, we can certainly appreciate this submission because we understand it's important in a process to give residents a voice and to be heard. This comment refers to the minor nature of the variance, of which the planning department has stated that we in fact are seeking a variance that's minor in nature. However, if you would like further clarity, you could reference the additional drawings that I submitted titled Side View Height, which show that the actual area of the deck that requires that 1.8 height average is towards the end of the deck. So it's beyond our control due to the sloping nature of the grade of the soil. And it's important to understand that when you look at that deck, there's a portion of the deck that would be below the 1.5 meter height, which is on average for the 3 meter distance from the property line. With our house being 8 meters, 8.0, whatever that is, we're kind of, our hands are tied with where that is. But I would like to suggest, you could see behind us, there's 2 sets of double doors where we're sitting now here in this Zoom call. And those doors start at 1.55 meters off the ground. And then the ground slopes away from that. So it's very difficult for us. The other key piece that, we just want to mention, when you talk about the importance of enjoying living space and being able to go out onto a deck, we often have our 85-year-old mother with us, and we want to obviously protect her from COVID, but she's had some health issues, a knee replacement, a recent serious fall on her stairs at home. So to think that we'd put a living space outside where she'd have to navigate the steps and possibly be unsafe, that's a concern for us. And then lastly, my wife and I would like to let you know that we've worked hard to meet all the requirements of the variance request. And we've been thrilled, again, with the easiness of the staff of Fort Erie throughout this whole process. We ourselves have made the efforts to be informative and inclusive, collaborating with the neighbors to ensure that all of them within the 70-meter distance of our home are in agreement and do not feel that there's any loss of privacy or concern regarding this.
Thank you. Do the members have any questions or comments for the applicant? David or Chris?
I just have one.
Yep,
Just
go
one
ahead.
thing. Okay, so my question is, did you guys build this house or buy the house already built?
We built the house.
Okay, so I mean, I'm not questioning your process, so don't take it the wrong way. So I'm just asking the question because you would have been in front of the committee anyways. Did you ever think that you're going to put a deck on in the process that you were building it, or was this an afterthought, or you didn't know what you wanted to do? Because I'm just asking simply because of the fact that you could have done this while you were building it. And I'm not saying it would have saved anything. I'm just saying that you would have been able to get it over with quicker.
I think that's a very important point you're making. We would have loved to have had this discussion with the builder at the time that it was occurring. Those French doors behind us are actually a change in design of the house. what we weren't even, it wasn't on our radar whether or not we'd be in a problem with the zone or the bylaws, the distance and the height. And the grading wasn't even done when we moved into the house. It was actually done as recent as June this year. And so that's when I started my process investigating with the city in the town regarding what a variance is like. And I was actually led to that by Jay Maraka, who coached me through some of this and then let me know that, wait a second, you might need to have a variance, so you have to go through that process. So that's when I was first made aware of this. However, back at, even in the comment from the resident who raised concern about this, that resident, I noticed, mentioned in there that they should have been made aware by the builder. And of course we weren't, for sure. If there was something put on the table that we'll build a deck for you and this is what it's like, this is what it costs, we would have done that in a second.
Okay, thank you.
That's
No
a good
further
question.
questions, Sam.
Good question. Chris, do you have any questions?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, to the applicants. In regards to the one person who has raised the objection, did you show them the design as you did the other neighbors?
Well, my understanding is that the people that got the letter or that received the letter from council were within 60 meters of my house. So I went out to 70 meters and talked to every single person there. So you have those letters back from those people. I have no idea who that person is. I guess it's a privacy thing with you where I don't get notified who the letter came or the email that came through against the variance. I'm even having trouble understanding if that person lives right here or not.
Hear you, Mr. Chair. I did reach out to the person that provided those comments for further details on their property address and their name. However, they did not reply. So just so we know we did try to find out who it was, but.
Okay. That's all the questions I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I had two questions. The one question was, where was the neighbor located that was against this application? Carrie just let me know. The other question I have is the length of the deck. Is it like slightly bigger than the length of the house? Is that what I'm getting at?
It is to allow just for the stairs to be off to the side.
Okay. Was there any, okay. That you just wanted from the side, not from the back. Is that correct? You've always had that intent?
That's correct. And my original submission to the planning department to Jay on the original designs was going to be closer to within the 3 meter line for a 1.5 meter deck. That's what the plan was. So it was actually about 20 feet out, 20 feet, however many meters. And then in speaking with planning, Anamika, her comment was, if you pull that design back to 4.2, we'll be sure to approve it.
All right, so you had consultation with the town to make it longer instead of wider. Is that what I'm getting at?
Yes.
Okay, that was my question. Okay, is there anyone in the audience who wish to comment? Please raise your virtual hand, or you'd be asked to speak one at a time or by phone. Mackenzie, I'll let that go with you here now.
Chair, I'm seeing no one who wishes to speak to this application.
Okay, thank you. Do the committee members have any other questions, or we're good with the submission and oral comments made by the applicant? Dave, you have any other questions or comments?
No, I do not.
Chris?
I do not, Mr. Chair.
And I have none. I'll ask that this public hearing to be closed, and I'll ask the members to make their decision. And whether Chris or Dave, you can make your comments and make your decision. I'll go from there. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I'll be in favor of minor variance file number A2520 tonight. It meets the 4 tests, and I didn't have any issue with what they've designed.
Thanks, Chris.
Mr. Chair, I'll be supporting application A25/20 tonight. I don't have any issues. Again, just to reiterate what Dave said, it meets the 4 tests, and I think that It's accurately pointed out that the slope of the ground requires this to be done for the deck to be built properly.
Thank you, and I'll be supporting the application based on my colleagues stating that it passes the Ford test. It's not going to have an impact on the abutting properties. There is a lot of privacy space for the abutting neighbors, the way the situation of the land is with the applicants and the surrounding neighbors. So I'll be supporting the application. If someone wants to put the motion on the floor.
I'll put a motion forward that minor variance file number A2520 be accepted with the condition of Environmental Advisory Committee acceptance.
And do I have a seconder, Chris?
I'll second that, Mr. Chair.
Okay, all in favor?
Yep.
The motion is carried. You'll receive a written notice of committee decision, and the decision will become final so long no appeal is received within the 20 days of the notice. Thank you for attending tonight.
Thank you.
Gonna wait till Dave gets back and then we'll proceed again. You're all set, Dave?
Sorry, Sam, go ahead. Thanks.
Okay, you're all set? We're good?
Mr. Chair, I'm gonna leave the meeting since Ken has returned.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks, Chris.
Thank
Thanks for helping us out and thanks for attending tonight.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Thank you, Chris.
Have a good night.
Good night. Okay, Mackenzie, our next application, minor variance file 82620. Can you please bring in the applicant, Upper Canada Consultants? The owner is Tanya Cullen and it's 3761 Disher Street.
Good evening.
Hi, Craig. How are you?
Good. How are you guys doing?
Good. And are you ready to proceed with the minor variance file 82620?
I am, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll ask Kara to read the correspondence. Thank you.
The purpose and effect of this application is to reduce the westerly interior side yard for an air conditioning unit and standby generator. The committee approved a minor variance application A13 for the subject property on July 16th, 2020, conditional upon the applicant relocating the air conditioning unit and the standby generator to ensure compliance with the zoning bylaw. During the review of A1320, it was brought to staff's attention that the existing electrical units will not comply with the setback requirements of the zoning bylaw once the new lot line is established. Staff discussed the issue with the owner of the property and provided two options to either relocate the units or comply with the bylaw requirements of providing 0.5 meters setback between the air conditioning and standby generator units and the new lot line. In order to satisfy the condition of the approval, the applicant agreed to relocate the units to the new location. However, the owner now wishes to relocate the units to the old location and has submitted a minor variance application to request a reduction to the interior side yard width. The subject lands are located in the Ridgeway Thunderberry area. Comments attached to this report received via email from new owners of the subject property to the west supporting the variance, and we also received comments not in support of the application. The Ontario Planning Act provides that a minor variance must meet the following four tests to be considered minor and supportable. Is the variance minor in nature? The proposal to reduce the interior side yard setback for an air conditioning unit and a standby generator to 0.2 meters and 0.3 meters respectively is not minor in nature. The requested location of the units is too close to the westerly lot line and would have an adverse impact on future residents of the dwelling due to the noise generated by the units. Further, the reduction in the interior side yard will make the units inaccessible in a situation of repair or maintenance if a situation of repair or maintenance is required for units. Lastly, a French drain is located along the west lot line of the subject property, and the proposal may result in future drainage issues. Is the proposed variance considered desirable and appropriate? The applicant's proposal to locate the air conditioning unit to only 0.2 meters and standby generator to 0.3 meters from the westerly property will have an adverse effect on the future resident of the abutting dwelling due to noise generated by the electrical units. Further, the existing French drain located along the west property line would also be inaccessible if there is a drainage issue in the future. Therefore, the proposal is not desirable for the development of the land and building. Does the proposal meet the intent of the zoning bylaw? The intent of the regulations of the zoning bylaw that establish setbacks for air conditioning units in side yards is to ensure that an adequate amount of space remains available for maintenance and access in the yard. This intent is not maintained with this proposal. The proposed setback of 0.2 meters and 0.3 meters does not provide sufficient space for access and maintenance in the interior side yard. Therefore, the proposal does not currently meet the intent of the zoning bylaw. Does it meet the intent of the official plan? The land use designation permits residential dwellings and the air conditioning units and standby generator. The proposed variants meet the general intent of the official plan. Based on the above comments, planning staff recommends that the committee deny this application. Infrastructure provided that if the application is approved, that the air conditioning unit and standby generator must be located outside of the French drain and swale, so drainage is not impeded. The building department stated that they, for the proposed variance for reduced setbacks to the generator, have been reviewed and they had no comments. It was noted by the drainage superintendent that this is part of the man drain watershed, and no comments received from community planning. Fire had no concerns or questions. A letter was received from the new owners. My husband and I are the new owners of the newly created lot directly next door to 3761. This letter is in support of the minor variance application A2620 at 3761 Disher Street in Ridgeway. We have no issue with the generator and AC unit being placed in the space between both these houses. Our house will be built using insulated concrete forms, and the house design is such that the garage and kitchen and living rooms will be the ones on that side of the house, so there won't be any disruption as far as we are concerned. Comments were also received from a neighbor. I feel this town is allowing too many lots to be severed and severed too small. The green space in Ridgeway is vastly being taken over by too many homes, too close together. We are not a big city. We are a quaint town at one time. Now we are not. I believe that this particular property owner has violated many of the town's bylaws. They seem to do things and then ask for permission. So my answer is no, they should not have this variance. Thank you. That concludes all our comments for the report with the only conditions stated if it is approved of the French drain by infrastructure.
Thank you, Kara. Craig, would you like to comment any of the correspondence that Kara's just read?
Certainly, I do have a presentation prepared that I think Mackenzie's going to queue up. So I'd just like to take you through that whenever she's ready.
Are you able to see my screen?
Yes, I can now. Yep.
Perfect. So you can just give me a cue when you'd like me to switch.
Okay, will do. Thank you. So good evening, committee members. My name's Craig Rowe. I'm a senior planner with Upper Canada Consultants, and I'm the agent that's representing the property owners. Our office is located at 30 Hanover Drive in St. Catharines. As you are aware, the staff recommendation is for the denial of the variances requested by my client. It is my intent to provide you with a brief presentation, which will outline the intent of the application and how, in my opinion, the 4 tests of a minor variance are indeed satisfied and that the application should be approved. Next slide, please. So the subject lands are known as 3761 Disher Street in Ridgeway. The subject lands contain a single detached dwelling with a detached garage at the rear of the property. The previously existing semi-detached dwelling on the property was demolished to facilitate the recent development of the now existing dwelling. Next slide, please. So this slide shows the new dwelling, which was constructed in 2019. As you can see, it exhibits compatible design and fits well within the neighborhood. Consistent with most dwellings on the street, the operating machinery, i.e. the air conditioners and generator, are located on the side of the dwelling. Next slide, please. So the images on this slide show the existing conditions on the west side of the dwelling, looking both north and south. Both the air conditioning and generator unit were removed consistent with the conditions of approval for the previous consent application, which was heard by this committee about 2 months ago. Next slide. Okay. This photograph shows the desired location of the operating machinery. It's important to note that this area is graded and provided with a French drain. The surface covering of this area is river rock, which is also on top of approximately 4 feet of clearstone when they did the French drain. Both the units also sit on a movable patio paver. Next slide, please. So recently, the Committee of Adjustment granted a severance, which was Town File B1220FE, to create a new 512.7 square meter lot on the western portion of the property. Through the required review of the consent application, associated minor variance for the proposed parcel, a potential encroachment of operating machinery, which would be the existing air conditioning unit and the standby generator, were identified on the retained parcel by town staff. Removal of the machinery was required to fulfill the conditions of consent. Conversely, a variance to permit them in their former locations could also be used to satisfy this condition. So upon the committee's conditional approval of the consent, that equipment was disconnected and removed. Next slide, please. So the variances before the committee this evening are to permit an air conditioning unit 0.2 meters from the interior side lot line, whereas 0.5 meters is required, and also to permit a standby generator 0.3 meters from the interior side lot line, where 0.5 meters is required. These positions are consistent with the previous location of these two units. The client is intending to purchase and install a new higher efficiency, low decibel, about 55 decibels, which is about the same noise level as a dishwasher running, and they're going to place that in replacement of the previous unit. The measurements for these units, including that new one they're purchasing, were provided to UCC, and that's what we use with their topographic survey to plot it on the variance plan. That image is on the next slide if you just forward on. So as you can see here, we have this is the survey plan, and through our topographic work, we've also showed a zoom in there of where the air conditioner and the standby generator are going to be located. Next slide, please. So, of course, for tests to a minor variance, that's them listed on the screen. The committee is, of course, familiar with that. So I'd like to dive right into those. Next slide, please. So with regards to conformity with the general intent purpose of the official plans, the subject lands are designated as low density residential in the town of Fort Erie official plan. The subject lands are to be developed with single detached dwellings only, which is a permitted use and consistent with all adjacent development. Equipment such as air conditioners and generators are incidental to the residential uses and are common for many forms of dwellings throughout the community. As these items are primarily associated with residential development, requested variances to establish their location and operation is considered in keeping with the general intent of the official plan. Next slide, please. So with regards to meeting the general intent of the zoning bylaw, the subject lands are zoned residential R2, which permits single detached dwellings only. A recently constructed single detached dwelling currently exists on the subject plans, which I showed you on the previous slides. The air conditioning unit and the standby generator are interpreted to be operating machinery as defined under section 5.238 of the zoning bylaw, which states that operating machinery means an apparatus having one or more moving parts, which are driven by other than muscular power, including air conditioners, electric motors, compressors, and heat exchangers, and meet the following criteria. Now, there are some additional criteria to that, but point V specifically relates to AC and generator. So point V, that operating machinery be permitted to encroach into any interior side yard, provided that the said operating equipment shall not be located less than 0.5 meters from any lot line, except that an air conditioner or automatic standby generator shall not be located less than 0.5 meters from any lot line. So the general intent of the 0.5 meter setback requirement, I think you need to just flip the slide. My apologies there. There we go. Okay, so the general intent of the 0.5 meter setback requirement is to maintain adequate space for drainage, access, and maintenance. If the variances are granted, it's my opinion, as well as my clients, that there will continue to be adequate space to achieve these objectives, thus confirming that the interior side yard location remains the ideal location for these units, and that the applications are keeping with the general intent of the zoning bylaw. Next slide, please. In terms of desirability for the use or land, specific to this property and the structure itself, having the committee's permission to connect the units back to their original location is considered most appropriate, safe, and cost-effective to the owner. There will still be sufficient area to maintain the equipment and maintain the yard around them if needed, even if a fence or other linear division is provided along the property line. I would also add that the individuals building a house next door to the west have no objection to the establishment of the units in their former location. As can be seen in their submitted letter, the abutting portion of their proposed dwelling will be the garage. In my opinion, the continued use of the property for residential purposes, including the placement of the accessory machinery in the interior side yard, is desirable and appropriate. Next slide, please. With regard to the application being minor in nature, it's my opinion that these requested variances are minor in nature with no impact to any adjacent properties. This is further justified by the closest property owner supporting the request as well. There are no impacts to the ability to access, maintain, or replace these machinery units. They can be easily disconnected. They sit on a movable patio stone if any maintenance is required. as they were disconnected in alignment with the conditions of the committee prior. The new AC unit will also be a low decibel version of 55 decibels, as I said, which is comparable to a running dishwasher. It's certainly more compatible than the previous unit, which would have been louder. The new development immediately adjacent to, the new development that's locating to the west will be locating their garage next to the machinery, and they will have to adhere to the appropriate setbacks of the zoning bylaw as well. So there will be room to get in there, and they've cited no concerns. And finally, drainage will not be affected. The side yard, as you saw in those images, when the French drain was put in, was backfilled with about 4 feet of clearstone. On top of that, there's river rock. And then, as I noted, the machinery sits on movable patio pavers. So by having the operating machinery there, it's not limiting any of the ability of rainfall to percolate into the ground and carry off through the drainage solution. So I find that point of putting these back in their situation is not a fair comment. There's no poured concrete foundation putting here that would stop any water from draining into the ground, and that drain serving its purpose. Next slide, please. So in conclusion, to recap, what we're going to see is a low decibel air conditioning unit that's being put on the side of the dwelling to help mitigate noise. The machinery will be accessible with no impacts on drainage. The resident who would be considered to be the most impacted has cited no objection to the placement of this operating machinery in its previous location. The approval of these variances will also help facilitate the clearance of condition related to that previous consent that was granted. And the impact of reinstating the units is considered negligible, and it should be supported. So based on the proceeding in my evaluation of this application, my presentation is very consistent with the planning brief that I did provide to town staff with the application. I find that the applications are consistent with the 4 tests of the Planning Act, and they represent good planning, and they should be approved. And the only other note that I would add there is, based on my comments about drainage, I feel that the condition being imposed by the engineering division is not necessary.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Craig. Would the committee members have any questions or comments? Dave, you have any questions or comments?
Actually, I do. So my first question is, why the reverse back to leaving them in the spot that they were originally?
So through you, Mr. Chair, when we were retained by Ms. Cullen, she noted that this notion of the encroachment and not aligning with the zoning bylaw came up just as their application for consent was proceeding, and they did have arrangements for the purchase of that lot coming up. So they accepted the terms of the municipality to disconnect that machinery and move it off site to carry on with that application. Based on my discussion with the Ms. Cullen and her partner, the house is brand new construction. It's been wired and set up in a way where the generator has been hooked up in that location to power the house. And also that's where all the air conditioning unit has all been wired. So if all this machinery needs to be moved off the side of the house, they effectively need to go and rewire their brand new dwelling and potentially cause damage in the basement level. So from their perspective, they felt if it could be justified appropriately through a planning lens to put the machinery back where it came from to avoid those undue costs or damages to their home.
Okay, so on that point, they were the ones who severed the lot, correct?
That is correct.
And the house was already built prior to them severing for the lot?
Correct.
So they knew where everything was before they went through the process?
Correct.
Right? So they knew right up front where everything was and what it was going to cost. So I have a hard time understanding. You knew what it was before you started, and now you're coming back and you're saying that it's going to cost money, more money than you thought, or you didn't realize it was going to cost, or you didn't realize that what was involved in doing what you were doing. Like, you understand my point? Like, you knew where everything was when you started the process, and now all of a sudden you're coming back and you're saying, you know, I want to change it because I really don't like that, because now I have to change everything in my house, even though you knew that was the way it was right off the bat. I mean,
Through you, Mr. Chair, as I noted, Ms. Cullen was made aware of this side yard requirement for operating machinery when their application was proceeding forward. So that was brought to their attention through the zoning review when they did have that active consent and variance application in well after the home was built. So was brought to their attention at that time when they began working with Upper Canada when we appeared on their behalf at the consent. And as I noted at that meeting, that we would be addressing the situation of that operating machinery. And based on their evaluation, they felt it was appropriate to make a request of the committee to reinstate that equipment back to the location it was, because they felt there would be no impact.
Okay, and then just my last question is, there's a fence at the back property line, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so my question is, neighbors never stay in the same spot and houses can get sold. So during that application, you're saying that it's easy to get around to do any work on both of those units, but to get around them, you're actually going on somebody else's property. So in future, I'm thinking down the road, if this house ever gets sold, somebody else who has to do maintenance on that has to go on somebody else's property, which ends up inevitably causing friction at times between neighbors if they don't get along. Now, I know they get along with the new neighbors that are coming in now that are building the house. That may not be the problem, but down the road it may be. That's just my feeling. You can respond to that, Craig. It's up to you.
No, I could certainly see your point from that vantage point. I would note that these are movable pieces of machinery. They're not bolted into a concrete pad, never to be removed. I've seen the HVAC guys doing repairs before. They're hopping over top of these units if need be. I think it's reasonable to assume that there is a method to get around that machinery and move it if possible. But as I noted, when the house construction does occur next door, there is going to be a required setback to their structure as well, which will provide a little additional room if that is the concern of the committee.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dave. Ken, do you have any questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, just a question to Craig. In the beginning background of the staff report, it makes mention that the applicant was provided two options to either relocate the units or comply with the bylaw requirements. So I'm kind of curious as to why not the second option. Why didn't they comply? And we wouldn't be here today.
Through you, Mr. Chair, based on the sizing of the existing generator and the existing and proposed air conditioning unit, there is no way to avoid the encroachment into the 0.5 meter setback. They would require relief or have to move them, both units, to a brand new location. They're unable to fit within that space between the existing dwelling and that 0.5 meter setback.
So I guess I want to press the point, Craig. If they're severing the lot and they're actually creating a building lot, then why not make it lesser size so that they can avoid having to get this minor variance?
Through Mr. Chair, we did have a discussion about that. However, as noted, they were working with the purchasers of that lot, and they had their obligations to move forward through the committee, and felt that there could be a resolution to reinstate that machinery through the appropriate planning process.
My second question is that you make good comments about the improvements in noise reduction for the air conditioner. I'm supposing that, just as sort of a two-part question, Craig, that unit that they're talking about, according to the drawing, and I realize it's just a drawing, it appears to be like a cube kind of air conditioner. And what I'm referring to, I've heard that there are units that are available that are more linear in design, that can actually fit in very tight spaces so that they don't have this encumbrance of being too close to the lot line. Has that question been explored?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, not to my knowledge. I'm not sure if those slender linear models are capable of having a noise reduction function, or if they're capable of processing enough power, I guess for lack of a better term, to cool the dwelling. it would certainly be something that the homeowners would have to explore, but they have made their selection based on their desire to also have a quieter operating unit, which just so happens to have those measurements that are provided on the plan before you this evening.
The second question, which is related, is just to do with the emergency generator, albeit, you know, we do have the occasional brownout here. When those things start up, I have one myself, they can make it quite a racket. Whereabouts is it located in relation to the build of the new home that's coming?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I do not have the benefit of detailed building permit plans. However, going based on the requirements of the zoning bylaw and the additional built form on the street, I would suggest that their dwelling, this being the garage, based on what the comments have provided, would be next to the dwelling itself. So that generator would be between the existing dwelling and then the garage of this proposed dwelling.
You know, Craig, if the basement is finished in the existing dwelling?
I do not know, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Ken. Craig's got a couple of questions. Upper Canada was the one that proposed where the French drains were originally?
Through you, Mr. Chair,
Yes.
no, that work was undertaken by the homeowner, and that location and that method was done in collaboration with Mr. Keegan Jennings at the town.
And that was done during the application with the consent application that was proposed 2 months ago, or that was already complete?
To Mr. Chair, that was completed prior to.
Okay, because I remember the neighbors were, if I concur, believe they were talking about drainage issues in that area. So I thought that probably rectified it then?
Yes, without going into too much detail, Mr. Chair, there seems to be a little bit of ongoing friction between my clients and the neighbor to the rear, and about possible encroachment of a hand during hand excavation.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that that was addressed. I got a couple problems. I'm not concerned about the air conditioning, the unit being noisy. My problem is the maintenance, the accessibility, and the generator in that location. And I know Kenny asked you, where in proximity would that be located with the proposed garage in that area? You don't have an answer for that, so I'm kind of a little skeptical right now. And the other thing is, what happens if the person wanted to build a fence along that property line? How is that someone going to be? How could that person actually maintain maintenance of the AC if the AC, there's a problem with it? How are they going to actually maintain it?
To Mr. Chair, as I alluded to with the other member, I think that there's reasonable methods of navigating past the machinery if a fence happened to be constructed, to certainly get back there and move it. As I noted, these aren't solid fixtures. They're able to be disconnected and they're able to be moved if required. Okay, and the other question I have also, it's like, okay, we're gonna consent this land. We have to move that air conditioning piece over. We sell the land, we get our money, and now we're gonna go back to the community adjustment, get a variance to see if we can put that AC there. That was part of the conditions was to relocate the air conditioning unit. I have a problem with that. I'm gonna let you know right now. And the second thing is, what was the cost of relocating the electrical of the generator and the AC? Do you have an approximate cost or no? I do not have an approximate cost for you, Mr. Chair. I do know that the homeowner is participating this evening, and whether or not they're willing to share that information, I'll defer to you to ask that question. Okay, and the other question I have is, when they built the house on that property, wouldn't you think the builder or the applicant would have known that factor, that air conditioning unit and generator is almost right along that property line? I mean, I just, this is mind-boggling now. And I have a problem with that issue too. They should have had the expertise, or the builder should have actually told the applicant when they're in the building process to say, you know what, that's close to the property line. If you decide to consent
the piece next to you, you know, this could be an issue being raised. And that probably wouldn't have happened if we wouldn't be here right now if those 2 units were put in a different area on that new house that was built. Do you concur with that?
Mr. Chair, I would agree that that certainly is a fair point, and I know from my perspective, I do not believe that they had the advantage of having any planning representation during the planning of the construction of their home. Certainly builders are aware of zoning requirements. However, at the time, even if they were aware of the requirement, the western lot line would actually be on the far side of that other lot, which is recently created. So it just might have been a matter of just simply building, not focusing too much on the zoning.
Okay. So here's the question I have. If you're going to do the test, what's the hardship? What is the hardship of this test? Why should we grant you the variance? Why should the applicant get the variance? What's the hardship? Because to me right now, it looks like the convenience of the applicant, and you're not alleviating the unavoidable hardship. So you're going to have to tell me or convince me or the committee that this is the alleviate the unavoidable hardship. Why is the variance is created? How can you resolve that to convince me that this is not a matter of convenience, but a matter of the bylaw is creating a hardship. Therefore, we have to bring the air conditioning unit back to that area.
Certainly, and a point well made, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll simply kind of walk through it methodically. It cannot go in the front yard. It cannot go on the other side yard due to the driveway. They do have rear yard amenity area available. It is currently manicured. If committee members have had the benefit of walking the property, it's well put together. Certainly, the hardships that they would endure would be modifications to a home that they've just recently completed and that they are very quite proud of. And certainly, the test that I would propose is that perhaps a significant modification to a recently constructed dwelling is not as minor as granting small relief to place these devices back in their original condition when it is reasonable to assume that the intent of the official plan, the zoning bylaw, and being desirable for the land with no opposition from the adjacent neighbor. And it really has a negligible impact on anybody except the homeowners and the person next door. So to me, their hardship would be having to do possibly significant modifications. I'd say particularly for the generator being tied into everything. Maybe not so much for the air conditioning unit, but certainly for them to have to just finishing that project and now having to go in and chip back away at it when I feel that a lot of the concerns that were raised in the staff report were easily addressed. No impacts to drainage still being accessible. I think it's a reasonable request and avoids any undue hardship on them from financial, of course, but also just the disruption now that they finally finished their home and they're enjoying it.
Okay, I agree with you there. The last question I have is, then why wasn't this brought up during the consent application? The choice was there. In order to get that consent, you had to move that. At that point, did you consider that, okay, if we move that, it's going to cost us this. The hardship is because you can't do it in the front, you can't do it in the driveway, and we don't want to destroy anything in the back. How come that was not contested during the application, the consent application?
Yes, to you, Mr. Chair, that point was well made to us when the Cullens brought Upper Canada in. And they did indicate to us their obligations regarding the, that was a cat, regarding their intent. Sorry, I got distracted by the animal that just walked across Ms. Rage's screen there. Yes, it was brought to our attention, but due to the obligations that our clients had with the people that were purchasing the home next door, they felt that it was prudent to move forward with the application as is, as they had a favorable staff report. And specifically the minor variances they were asking for, they were able to get a little bit of a wider frontage there and had that staff support. I think the impact of relocating those operating machineries was considered negligible from their opinion, as well as having a good relationship with those individuals who are moving in. They felt like as neighbors, they would be able to mitigate it. And I really feel like there's really no impact on anybody else here. And we've demonstrated that it's not going to have adverse impacts on either of the properties.
Okay, thank you. And just to concur again, you have no recall recollection of what type of house they're building, where the garage is located next door, as what the neighbors have submitted, or the new owners, proposed neighbors are going to build right beside them. You have no evidence, nothing inconclusive, or there's going to be a garage there, the location, proximity of the AC and the generator.
My only knowledge on this, Mr. Chair, is that I believe the neighbors may have submitted their building permit plans to the municipality recently, which would have been available for town staff to review. All I can rely on is the correspondence from that prospective neighbor, as well as Ms. Cullen stating that there is indeed a garage going next door to this, and it's not as sensitive as if it were a bedroom.
Okay, thank you. Do any members have any other questions for the applicant or the agent?
No, I do not.
Ken, you have one? Go ahead.
Just a quick question, Mr. Chair. Craig, are you familiar with what the side yard setbacks would be for the neighboring property that is to be built?
If my memory serves me right on the town zoning bylaw, I believe it may be a 1.2 meter minimum on one side and a 3 meter on the other. Typically that 3 meter setback, I think usually ends up with the garage side.
So just to carry on from that, their driveway would be on the left side as you look at the house.
Through you, Mr. Chair, based on the information provided to me and the indication that a garage will be constructed along the eastern lot line, I would agree that the driveway would likely be on the eastern side of that lot with no habitable space.
Okay.
Ken, do you have any other questions, or you're done? I didn't hear it. Sorry.
I'm all done, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. I'll ask now, Mackenzie, is there anyone in the audience who wants to come in and make a presentation or comment on the application?
Chair, I'm seeing no one who wishes to speak to this application.
All right, do the committee members have any further questions or comments before we close the file? Ken?
Mr. Chair.
Do you have any questions or comments? Okay, go ahead. Do you have any other questions, or?
I don't have any further questions, no.
Okay, Dave, do you?
No, I don't.
And the applicant, Craig, do you have any other questions or concerns? Your submission is basically what you just told us.
I'm comfortable with my submission. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, I'll ask the committee members now to present their views. I'll ask that this file to be closed and to present their views, and then we'll go from there.
Mr. Chair, I will not be in favor of this variance tonight. It does not meet the 4 tests, and given the history, I will not be in favor of this.
Ken?
Mr. Chair, I concur with my fellow member. I'm disappointed in the outcome of this particular situation. I'm sure it's a stress for the owner. Certainly compliment Craig for a well put together presentation. I think it goes back to the very beginning that they had the opportunity to provide for the requirement of being that minimum setback for their equipment. I think that this could pose difficult situations in the future. And certainly I do not want to be condoning this kind of perceived process where you can comply at one time and then expect forgiveness the second time. Those are just very personal opinions, and I would not be supporting this variance application.
Thank you, Ken. I concur with both colleagues. I mean, their submissions and right on what I have my feelings. I just think this is to avoid that. This is a convenience of the applicant, and this is not to avoid any hardship. And I don't buy the case about the accessibility is a big issue with me. The noise is not going to be a problem. It's just the accessibility, and I just don't buy this. Like I said, I made a point before, when they built the house, they should have been consulted by the builder about where to locate the generator or the air conditioner. And, you know, we agreed to, with the consent application, as I sat as a chair there, that they had to move it in order to get that piece of property be consented in order for them to have a purchaser come in and build that house. And now they're coming back and they say, oh, I want to put that air conditioning back. And I just have I don't agree with that. So I'm not in support of this application. If someone wants to put the motion on the floor.
I'll put a motion forward that minor variance file A26-20 be rejected.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Yeah, this application has been denied, Craig, and tell the applicant they're going to have to do what they have to do as putting the air conditioning in another location. Okay?
Yep, that's good. Thanks for the opportunity to speak and at least have some good dialogue. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.
Okay, the final variance application for tonight is minor variance file A2720. The address is 4353 Erie Road. The applicant is Chris Hawkswell. The owners are Billy Hawkswell, and Mackenzie, can you bring the applicant in first?
Yes, he is just joining us now.
And Mackenzie, you're going to read the correspondence, correct?
Yes, I am.
I got that right. Okay.
Good evening.
Hi, Mr. and Mrs. Hawkswell. Are you ready to proceed with your tonight's application?
Yes, we are. Thank you very much.
Okay, and I'll ask Mackenzie, she's going to be reading the correspondence, okay?
Okay.
And after that, then you can, if you have any comments or questions, you can ask us through the committee, and then we'll go from there, okay?
Perfect. Thank
So
you.
you ready to proceed?
Yes, we are.
Okay, I'll ask Mackenzie to read the correspondence. Thank you.
Thank you.
The purpose and effect of this application is to request an increase to the maximum permitted height of a detached accessory building to a dwelling to permit construction of a detached two-story garage. The Ontario Planning Act provides that a minor variance must meet the following 4 tests to be considered minor and supportable. The proposal to increase the maximum height of the proposed detached garage to 2 stories and 5.90 meters in height is minor. The additional story is to be used for storage purposes only, as indicated on the application form. The detached garage will appear ancillary to the proposed dwelling, which is 9.20 meters in height. Streetscape along Erie Road will not be negatively impacted as the proposed garage exceeds the minimum setback of 7.50 meters required by the waterfront residential zoning and is similar to other properties along the Lake Erie waterfront. The increase in height is also mitigated by increased side yard setbacks of 2 meters to the eastern lot line and 8.77 meters to the western lot line. The proposal to construct an accessory building to a dwelling is an appropriate and desirable use for the area. The development proposal is similar in nature to other properties along the Lake Erie shoreline and maintains the character of the area. The general intent of zoning bylaw regulations that limit height of detached accessory structures is to ensure that the accessory structures appear ancillary to the primary residential use and that they are not used for human habitation. This intent is maintained as the proposed garage will be lesser in height than the dwelling and will appear ancillary to the dwelling. The second story is proposed to be used for storage purposes only. The land use designation permits accessory buildings to dwellings, and so the proposal meets the general intent of the official plan. Based on the above comments, planning staff support the requested variances. There are no further comments from building, infrastructure, fire, or community planning, and drainage noted that the property is part of the Bay Beach Drain watershed. In terms of conditions, the only condition that was stated is that the owner provides the town with an undertaking affirming that the accessory structure will not be used for human habitation. That concludes.
Thank you, Mackenzie. Well done. Thank you. And do the applicants have any questions or comments?
I don't think we have any other comments other than what planning committee has brought forth. And we have no issue with undertaking that there'll be no habitation of the second floor.
Okay, thank you. Do the committee members have any questions? Dave, you have any questions?
No, I do not.
Ken, do you have any questions?
No, I do not.
The only two questions I have are just generic questions on these accessory buildings. What type of storage are you using this for?
Just residential storage for our cottage. So
we have
Okay.
equipment like paddle
Paddle.
boards, and we have lily pads that are quite cumbersome.
Okay, so like beach stuff, that's basically what you got, and outdoor furniture. Okay. Second thing is there any plumbing in that, located in that accessory structure? You designed to put any plumbing? Or no, it's just a structure?
we may put a utility sink in there just for cleaning, like with a garage, maybe cleaning out stuff, but that would be it.
And that'll be on the first floor, hopefully, right?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, I have no other questions. Mackenzie, would you like to seek out there if there's anybody like to make any comments?
I'm
On the
seeing no
phone or
I'm seeing no one who would like to speak to this application. It's just the owner in the waiting room at the moment.
Okay, thank you. I'll ask the committee members first. Do you have any, there's no questions. I have no questions. And do the applicant has any other comments, or you're good with everything?
We're good with everything. Thank you.
Okay, I'll ask this file to be closed in public, and I'll ask the committee members to express their views and put the motion on the floor.
I'll be in favor of this minor variance this evening. It's meets the 4 tests, and I don't have any issues with this one.
Ken?
Same here, Mr. Chair. It meets the 4 tests. They've agreed not to use it for habitation. Looks like a very similar building construction to the residential building that's by the shore. That's what I noticed when I was driving by. Anyway.
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. I'll be supporting the application, and like I said, the only thing that the town requests is a legal undertaking. So if somebody wants to put the motion on the floor, we can proceed.
I'll put a motion forward, the minor variance file A27-20 be accepted with the condition of the town's undertaking.
Have a seconder? Seconder? All in favor? Okay, the motion is carried. You'll receive a notice of committee decision, and the decision becomes final. So long, no appeals are received within the 20 days of the notice. Thank you so much for attending tonight.
Thank you for your time, everybody.
Take care. Okay, some administrative stuff for the committee here. May I ask for a motion from the committee to process the signing of the decisions concurred by the majority of members electronically. Need a motion? Ken?
Put a motion forward.
Okay, all in favor? Motion is carried. Any new business to be brought forward? None?
There's no new business that I'm aware of.
Any new business? Sorry, Kara, no?
And for
Okay.
me now.
Okay. Next hearing date is October 22nd, 2020. And if there's no further business this meeting, this is adjourned at 7:26.